and to start lecturing on, giving these great lectures on Hindu art and mythology and culture. And Joseph Campbell was one of the people who turned up. There were only 5 people during the first semester. The following semester there were 50, and the semester after that there were 200, and then he died of pneumonia suddenly in 1943 at the age of 52. And Campbell showed up to the first night there because he had met, Campbell had at this time just started his career as a scholar. He had been teaching at Sarah Lawrence since 1934, and Zimmer begins his seminars at Columbia in 1941. And he had happened to meet Heinrich Zimmer at a party at Swami Nikhilananda's. And the Swami had roped Campbell into helping him translate the Upanishads into English. And they're very good translations, but there's no mention of Campbell's name in the translations or in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna that he helped him to translate. And Campbell later remarks in his Hindu diaries how he felt used by the Swami and never received any credit for this. But anyhow, one night he's at this party at the Swami's, and the Swami was a great cook and would whip up curries for people and put on a marvelous show. And Zimmer happened to be there, and he liked him very much, and he heard that Zimmer was giving these lectures. So he goes to the lectures, and the two hit it off very well. And so this goes on for a couple of years, and in the meantime, Zimmer's making all these recommendations to Mary Mellon about, first, he says, well, you should hire this good Irishman, Joseph Campbell, who really knows a lot about mythology, and you should put him on the editorial board. For some reason, she didn't like the idea of that. And then she said, well, what should our first book be? And Zimmer said, if you're going to start this whole series on mythology, the first book that you ought to do should propitiate the spirits of the land. So you should do something on Native American myths. And he says, Joe Campbell knows a lot about Native American myths. He started out studying them. So he would be good to keep in mind for this. But there was this other woman named Maud Oakes with whom he co-authored this book. Maud Oakes, who Frau Olga, the Aranos patroness, had come over to a party one night and had made the comment while Maud Oakes was at the table, you know, I don't understand you Americans. You don't seem to know anything about the mythologies of the Native Americans. Why is that? And Maud Oakes said, well, I would love to go out to New Mexico and live with the Navajo and study with them for a while. And so the Mellons agreed to give her a stipend to go and do this. And so she became the first Bulligan Fellow. So Maud Oakes goes out to live with the Navajo in New Mexico for a while, and she befriends this old medicine man there named Jeff King. And he's one of about 2 Navajos still living who know all the myths. They have not been written down. And he is telling her, the problem with the new generations coming along, and this is back in the 40s, is that their young men of the tribes are not putting themselves to learning these myths anymore. And she says, well, one way of preventing that from happening is you tell me the myths, and we'll record them and we'll put them in a museum where they'll be written down and nobody will forget them. He's not too thrilled with the idea, but he agrees to it and tells her this whole mythology of where the 2 came to their father, which is this story about this woman who gives virgin birth to the 2 archetypes, the one of the warrior and the one of the shaman. Child born of water is the shaman, and Monster Slayer is the Dragon Slayer hero. And the town that the woman is living in has become besieged by monsters. And she says, you can go anywhere you want, just don't go north. So they head off north to go find their father, who happens to be the sun. And they journey up across a rainbow bridge and go up into the clouds, and they go through all these adventures, and the father gives them weapons, and they come back and kill the monsters, and they go through this process. So Maud Oakes records the story, but she apparently didn't know how to put it together into a book, and so Campbell was brought in to write a commentary on that, which is then published in 1943. Zimmer died earlier in that year. He had made the recommendation for it to be published, but he didn't live to see it published. And that's generally his first book, and it's in that essay in the back of that book called On the Hero, that is the seed from out of which the hero with 1,000 faces grows, which is then published in 1949. So Zimmer had an enormously effective presence. After his death in 1943, Zimmer's wife calls up Campbell and he says, we'd like to get all these lecture notes together into books, and would you be willing to undertake the editing of them? And he says, sure, and he spends the next, he thinks, well, just a couple of years fooling with these things. And for the next 12 years, he's editing 4 volumes of Heinrich Zimmer's work. The first one published in, I think it's 1946, Myths and Symbols in Indian Art and Civilization, one of the best introductions you can get anywhere to Hindu mythology. Then The King and the Corpse here was published in 1948. He publishes his own book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, in 1949. Then a book on the philosophies of India. And finally, in the early 50s, 54, I believe, a huge 2-volume work on the art of Indian Asia. And it's at this time, in 1954 and 55, that Campbell decides to go to India. And we'll save that, his journey there, for next time, what he finds there. Zimmer never made it to India. He had always wanted. This is coming down to. And what Zimmer is after in that essay is to show you that all the gods are within us. And he is very clear on showing you how, in that essay, the gods are really personifications of the various organs of the body. And it's very evident in something like Venus, who was born from the genitals of Uranus, which are thrown into the water. She's the goddess of the genitals. That is very obvious. Mercury is the god of the intellect, and Mars is the god of aggression, and so forth. But the main thing about myth that you'll find coming through, that Zimmer brings through here, and I believe is what is responsible for Campbell picking this up from Zimmer, and why he preferred Zimmer more than Campbell, contrary to what everybody thinks. Scholars tend to dismiss Campbell by saying, well, he was just a Jungian, but actually, when you read Campbell, you find out that the more you study him, the further away from Jung he actually got. And in one of those primary areas, it's this emphasis on the body. Campbell says that myths are the personifications of the energies of the body, and where those energies come from, we don't know. They're pouring in from the mysterious source. And this is what's always pictured in mythology as the one, the principle of the one. That's the source from out of which the energies of eternity come pouring through into time. And each one of us is a living manifestation of time, and so we have these gods within us. And gods, it turns out to be, according to Campbell and Zimmer, are projections out onto the cosmos of these various energies that move us. And so the job of myth is to harmonize these energies, because they can conflict with each other. The energy, the instinct of self-preservation may conflict with the erotic instinct. I mean, how we all know in the animal kingdom how mating very often occurs with the death of the male. The black widow, and in many cases with fish and all sorts of animals. The praying mantis, I believe, she completely devours and cannibalizes the male after intercourse. And so the instinct toward the erotic drive there is conflicting with the male's instinct for self-preservation. So these instincts conflict with each other. And the myths harmonize these instincts by producing symbols that unite these energies in various ways. Jung actually tells a story about it. His first introduction to Kundalini was actually through the physical symptoms of a patient of his that he had, and he did not know what was happening to her because he knew nothing at the time about Kundalini Yoga. This was before the texts were published in 1918 and 19. And the woman had been, she was European, she was of European parentage, but she was raised in the East, in India. And she came to Jung, and she had this actually was the woman that he had had the dream about, that he thought he was condescending, and the dream indicated that he was looking up at her very high. He must have been in reality condescending to her. Well, he says that she came to him with this, and he was the third analyst who examined her. She had failed to get anywhere with the two preceding analysts, and she was suffering from an animus possession. She had these irrational judgments, and he just was very frustrated with her. And then he said she began having these weird physical symptoms, and I couldn't figure out what was going on with her. She said the thing started with a dream that she had where she gave birth to a white elephant. And that made no sense to me whatsoever. And then she started having, I had to send her to, she started having ulcers in her uterus. And she started complaining of pains in her abdomen after a while. As the analysis went on, she started having problems with excessive urination. And then this began to flip into diarrhea. And it was as though something were moving up in her. And then one night, she reported to him that she had this dream that she felt a soft spot on the top of her head. And this bird with a long beak came down from above and inserted